I recently rebuilt my gaming/recording PC and decided it was a good time to try a bit of a different recording setup.
Can they finish us?
The recording you see here is using the default Streamlabs OBS settings, and I'm already pretty happy with it. But I'll talk about some tweaks you can make if your system is beefy enough for recording high quality VR while playing. Right now I'm running the following build: an Asus ROG Strix 3090, an AMD Ryzen 9 3900X, Asus ROG Strix X570E motherboard, and 32 gigs of RAM. Previously, I used the OpenVR plugin for Streamlabs OBS, but a colleague of mine pointed out that they've been using the SteamVR display view for recording to Streamlabs OBS, and it seems to work just fine for them. However, it does record the right eye by default. In my previous setup, I had set the OpenVR plugin to record my left eye since I'm left eye dominant. In any VR game where you might be looking down the sights of a weapon, it's important to record based on your dominant eye. Otherwise, when you look down your scope in the video, the audience won't see what you're actually focusing on. If you're not familiar with the SteamVR display view, when you're running SteamVR, you can click on the SteamVR writing at the top, navigate down to Display VR View, and get a nicely cropped output representing what you see in VR on one of your monitors. If you then click on full screen, you can get a pretty nice output for recording. And I find this output takes the least amount of effort to set up, as opposed to the OpenVR plugin for Streamlabs OBS. Now to choose your eye, you can click on the menu button in the VR view before you go to full screen and select your dominant eye, and in my case it's my left eye. I've linked a video here which will show you how to figure out what eye dominance you are when you're playing VR. Now I can go into full screen mode, wake up my headset, and you get a nice output that you can easily record in Streamlabs OBS. In Streamlabs OBS, I have a scene called Population 1 that's set to record the monitor with the full screen Steam view. Down in the bottom left corner is the settings. Note, I do not stream, and streaming requires different settings. Rather, I like to record and edit high quality video. If you're streaming, you're somewhat limited to the bandwidth that you can push out across your internet connection. In output, I'm using the advanced settings. I've set to record to a specific SSD I have reserved for recording video that's separate from the SSDs I use for everything else. I'm using MP4, and if there is any reason I should be using something else, please comment below. I'm also recording 2 audio tracks. One track records my voice, and another track records everything else. That's a trick I learned from some very experienced editors to help fix things like when I say something ridiculous and I want to take it out without blanking out the rest of the game audio, so it feels a little more seamless and it's not really noticeable that I blank something out. I'm set to software encoding because I have a pretty beefy CPU and I'm not too concerned about it being a bottleneck. But I'd love to hear from some creators who are using the NVENC encoder with the NVIDIA cards and whether it's worth switching. Because I'm using software encoding, I'm also going to set the rate control to CRF, and that's based on a recommendation from the Streamlabs documentation. 23 is the default setting here. I don't know if there's any good reason to change this. If you can think of a good reason, again, comment below. CPU usage is set to very fast, as that's the default, and for my profile, I bumped it up to high. In video settings, I have my base canvas set to the resolution of the monitor displaying the SteamVR view, and the output is also set to the same resolution. Ideally, if you're using the SteamVR window output, you should have these set to the same resolution as whatever monitor you're outputting to. I'm not downscaling, but if I were, I'd be using the Lanczos downscale filter. Basically because, again, it was something that was recommended to me and I can't see any reason why to use something else. Since I want the recording to look smooth, I'm going to record at 60 frames per second, but the default is 30 frames per second, so make sure you change that if you can. When I first started recording, I'd often have issues with which microphone was being recorded. Looking at the right-hand panel, there's a mixer and you can see the default mic here, and it happens to be set to my index mic. However, if Streamlabs isn't picking up the correct mic, you can add a new mic to your scene. Click the plus button, add an audio input capture, and you can see this lists things like USB mics. You'll see a list of existing sources, and you can add a new one using the slider here. I'll just name this test audio. When you add the source, you'll get a list of available devices, and there might be a lot here depending on how many different devices you've plugged into your computer and had audio capture functionality for. Since this is a fresh build, all I have on my list is my Yeti mic and my index mic. If I select my index mic, then look back at the mixer, you can see the default mic looks like it's picking up the same sounds as a new test mic audio. So really, I don't need this additional device for my setup. Looking at this one, you can see that it was actually set to my Yeti mic, but I'll change it over to my index mic. When it comes to tracks, by selecting this setting on the mixer, you can see what sources record to what tracks. Here I have my desktop audio going to track 1 and my microphone is going to track 2. This can really save you time later in editing if you have to blank out any voices or adjust volume levels for different sources. Finally, here's a bit of recording with the Windows Performance Monitor running with the new settings. You can see that with this new setup, running Population 1 and recording with some pretty high quality Stream OBS settings, neither the GPU or the CPU are being taxed very hard. The CPU hovers around 35 to 45% usage, and the GPU is sitting around 35 to 55% usage. Also notice when I look down my scope now, the recording shows what I'm focusing on. Hopefully you found this helpful. And while this probably only scratches the surface of what you can do to tweak your output, I'm finding these settings are working pretty well for my videos. If you have any suggestions, please post in the comments below. I'm pretty sure I could still improve the quality of my recordings by far. Hope to see you in Population 1 soon.